Welcome back to I-24 News special coverage. Zach Anders, our correspondent, is standing by the Kerem Shalom border crossing where we expect the Israeli hostages to go through sometimes, I would say, within an hour or so. What do you say, Zach?
And this is supposedly 10 additional hostages built on the back of a new deal prior to the original ceasefire. This is the 48-hour extension. We're supposed to see 10 additional hostages tonight, an additional 10 tomorrow. We are hearing rumblings that potentially more foreign workers may be released as well. These captive Thai workers who were also taken hostage potentially worked through other channels outside of the mediator, Qatar, and these other nation states involving themselves trying to release their own foreign nationals. We do not have a clear picture from the Rafah crossing of the Red Cross vans reaching that location. So that tells us that they're still inside, potentially inside southern Gaza from undisclosed locations where these handoffs take place, with Hamas bringing the hostages to this intermediary, the Red Cross, then the Red Cross placing them inside their own independent vehicles and driving them to the crossing where the Egyptian authorities will open that crossing and allow them to pass through, and then that exchange into Israeli hands can take place. We still don't see that yet on our cameras, and we are hearing that the exchange could still be some time. I will say that this is all taking place, these reports that the Red Cross is able to or has already received them inside Gaza. That's happening then at a much earlier time frame than what happened yesterday. Yesterday was delayed. This Red Cross exchange hadn't happened by this hour if you compare it to yesterday. So it does appear that things are moving. We're still, again, waiting from our location at the Kerem Shalom crossing on the Israeli side to get pictures and see these convoys of vehicle move north and begin that journey to reunite with their families.
All right, I-24 News, Zach Anders, thank you very much. We'll get back to you, hopefully shortly. Dani Ayalon, former Israel ambassador to Washington, to the United States, thank you for coming. Sure. This is the second phase, seems to be working. Guy reported that there was some progress about it, additional 2 days. But then there's the big one. What are the chances of the United States, Qatar, Egypt, and Israel and Hamas pulling a big one?
Well, Jacob, I'm sad to say, but it seems like all the keys are at this point in the hands of Hamas. They will decide what will be the features or what would be the continuation, if at all, for this big exchange. So far, it seems like Sinwar is mostly interested in their own survival of Hamas. He really is still toying with the idea that he will remain de facto in control of Gaza at the end of this entire endeavor. Hence, he's playing on time.
Right. The question is there any formula, any trick, if you will, that could arrange this, everything to fall in the right place, so to speak?
Well, I would say that Israel should take some initiative, if I were in a position to advise, and that is to try and think maybe out of the box, by saying, for instance, to this Sinwar and all his cronies, we'll allow you a safe passage out. Get us all the hostages, and you will get your life back, basically. and that means that the Hamas should lay down their arms, and then we can, in a non-violent way, think of the next phase of Gaza in terms of structure, administration, and who controls it.
Yeah, but then they tell me Sinwar will never take that. He will never leave.
So in that case, that we may have to, then I don't see any other way out without the continuation of the war in full force. And one thing, Jacob, is that I think that, there was a debate whether this ceasefire is helping Hamas to reorganize, regroup, rearm, and all that. I think the IDF is also can learn a lot. And hopefully lessons learned are more effective with the IDF. They are today much closer to Khan Yunis, to Sinwar than they were on the 7th or the 8th of October. So things may maybe seem to be going better if we have to resort back to force.
No easy questions tonight. I'm sorry. It's very complicated.
Yes.
Very complicated.
Yes.
The fact that hundreds of hostages were taken on October 7th changed the whole game. There's no doubt about that, right, Guy?
Absolutely so. This is not something that I think even Hamas have imagined in its wildest dreams, being able to take over 260 hostages on that October 7th. Obviously giving it so many cards to play with, into the point that we're seeing how generous Hamas is. We're talking about 90. If those additional 2 days are being approved, we speak about 90 Israelis that are being released as part of this deal. 8 days of a pause in the fighting, in addition to one more Israeli Russian that was released, and the foreign nationals. I think the children and the women were also a liability for Hamas to a certain degree. Obviously, in the psychological war against Israel, that was very important. But for the eyes of the world, even for the Palestinians and Hamas's strongest supporters, was very difficult to explain why is it that the 10-month-old baby needs to be kidnapped. Why should a 4-year-old girl, Abigail, be kidnapped after both her parents are being murdered in front of her eyes? When it comes to the males and to the soldiers, Hamas, from its point of view, has a much stronger case as it negotiates both with Israel and with the Americans, and it's the way it presents itself to the world.
Right. Meanwhile, we are looking at Rafah crossing. That's the border crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. That's where the Red Cross is expected to cross the border with 10 Israeli hostages and about 6 Thai nationals. That's what we know.
Yes, these are releases that are not related directly to this agreement between Israel and Hamas with the Qataris and the Americans. We know that when it comes to the Thais, this is also a fruit of the negotiations between Iran and Hamas, obviously, and Thailand, of course, having very close ties and the leverage that Iran has over Hamas. And also, obviously, there's no political reason for Hamas to hold on to those innocent, like these Israelis, so are these foreign nationals, innocents who were either working in the fields and the Israeli communities or in the party, etc., etc. There is absolutely no reason to hold on to them. And the fact that they're being held, even from day one, after their identity was clear, is something that the Hamas and supporters of the Palestinian cause will have to explain, because they have committed no wrong. They're not even Jewish.
Right. Ambassador Ayalon, let's go back to some speculation about what's going to happen, because we have nothing else to do but to guess. We don't really know, but we know for sure that if there is a deal on the table of releasing all Israeli hostages, the price on the Israeli side will be huge, and there's going to be a big debate in Israel about this.
Oh, absolutely. Not only it's huge from a strategic point of view, but also from a very narrow political interest of Prime Minister Netanyahu. It seems like all the messages that he gets from his base, and also even backbenchers of Likud, members of Knesset, they tell him, if you stop the war short of killing Hamas and changing the entire architecture of Gaza, architecture, I mean politically, not just, although it's also physical architecture as well, unfortunately for them, but they are to blame. If he stops short of eliminating Hamas, then they will actively seek his removal from the Prime Minister's office. So he's really in a bind, and Netanyahu is Netanyahu. You know, I think that mostly he thinks of, even now, unfortunately, of his political future and career. So I find it, Jacob, hard to believe that we will stop here. I believe that the war will continue. Now, there is another element here, of course, which are, you know, the big, I would say, stick in the room is the American administration and Joe Biden. What will they do? How do they see the way out? Would be very interesting to watch. I have some speculations, but we can keep it for the next.
I will note here that politics aside, the Israeli government has an obligation. The Israeli communities felt like they have been abandoned. If Israel doesn't go as far as eliminating Hamas, they will abandon them once again, and this will create an even greater crisis in the Israeli society that the Israeli voters will never forgive anyone as part of this government, and we don't need to go to the backbenches of the right-wing government. Let's hear from Minister Benny Gantz this evening saying, after the pause, the fire will be renewed. The entire war cabinet is united with this stance. There is no other option. We are setting for the next stages of the war. There will be no point that will be a safe haven for terrorists and for the heads of Hamas. We're committed to the safety of the residents of the South. I think he expresses what the majority of the Israeli public feels.
Yeah.
My question, do we have another minute?
Yeah.
My question is whether this was a real stance of, let's say, political principle, or is it just a message to Hamas? You better release everybody.
Right.
You'd still have a chance to do it before all-out war breaking out
both,
again.
maybe. Let's go to I24 News, Pia Steckelbach, with the families of the hostages in Tel Aviv. What's the latest there, Pia?
Right, Jacob. Well, families are still here, and also other people who just come around to show their empathy and their solidarity are still coming in here. And I want to step out of the frame for you to see over there a crowd of people standing. Earlier, there was some music being played, and a lot of people are just holding up signs with the pictures of the people who are still being held captive in Gaza. And family members are also wandering around and speaking to those who are interested to hear the story, also to speak to the media. Early on, we had a chance to speak to Yair Moses, whose mother was released on Friday, but whose father is still being held captive in Gaza. And he was expressing his appreciation for the fact that his mother was released. And he also emphasized that he's happy for each and every one who is being released, but that the society has to start thinking about the men who are still being held captive and the men who have not been part of any hostage release deal as of now. And not only men are still being held captive, but also children and entire families. Early on, there's been a press conference here at the square held by family members of family Bibas, a family that was captured from Nir Oz, and a family that contains a 10-month-old baby, Kfir, his brother Ariel, and the parents Shiri and Yarden, and they are all still being held captive in Gaza. And the family was releasing balloons, orange balloons that were resembling this remarkable hair color. They have quite become the symbol of the hostages that are still being held in Gaza. So the struggle here continues, and this is what this square here very much resembles, Jacob.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. This is the first war where a large number of IDF female soldiers were engaging in massive fighting, let alone that scores have been killed or captured. Religious and right-wing elements inside Israel have objected to drafting women for years. Here's more in the next report.
Their names are Hagar, Hila, Tal, Sarah, Michal, Kani, Ophir, and Tamar. Only 20 girls, give or take, but these tank women and other members of their units made history on the 7th of October. The first women in Israel, probably in the entire world, who fought in an armoured battle. A heroic battle in which they saved an entire kibbutz and killed dozens of terrorists. In this photograph, which is published here for the first time, you see the tank of Karni, the company commander, storming the gate of Kibbutz Holit, on its way to cleanse the kibbutz terrorists. The day of their battle began on the morning of October the 7th, when the terrorists breached the Gaza fence. The tankers were fairly far away, in another sector on the border of Egypt at their base in Nitzanit. They began moving with two types of vehicles, tanks and a type of armoured vehicle, the Killer, towards the north. The tanks raced, very untypically, dozens of kilometres on the way to the settlements around Gaza. Near the Sufa outpost, they encountered dozens of terrorists rushing towards them and advancing towards the fence. They noticed a huge opening created by the terrorists and left one tank there on guard. The tank of the platoon commander, Shaked, would from now on prevent Gazans from continuing to pass through the breach in the fence towards Gaza or towards Israel. The rest of the company continued to Kibbutz Holit. At the same time, Michal, another platoon commander, moved with her tank to help in the battle at Kibbutz Sufa. For 6 hours, they fought alongside the troops from other units, hitting dozens of terrorists, removing the murderers from the kibbutzim. This week, a month and a half later, we met them for the first reenactment of the day of the battle that will go down in the history books.
We had two tanks always on standby, whose destination is the border of Egypt. I gave them an order to drive on the roads towards Egypt, towards the fence, and told them we will meet on the way.
It's very unusual to tell the tanks,
Very unusual. Very unusual.
leave the section and drive north on the road.
This is very unusual, but between the reports of 6:30 and 7:30 in the morning, we understood this was something on a different magnitude.
I actually decided to upload Michal's tank on the Philadelphia route. I told her, get on the unit's network and just drive north. Be available for orders.
We moved north towards Sufa. That's actually where we saw the first encounter. A pickup loaded with conscious wounded. The commander of our force, the company commander, went up to the roof of her vehicle, operated the weapons, and basically crushed the pickup.
When we got to Sufa, there we saw the truck crashed on the road with the wounded outside. So that's when it dawned on me that we're really in combat and hearing massive shooting all around us. And they told us it's terrorists. There, I got the picture. We really were at war.
I got there. I identified the brigade commander. 2 vehicles and people behind the vehicles. They were wounded there too. And I started hearing gunshots from the north of the road.
I saw dozens of terrorists on the road, with vans, motorcycles, RPGs. I even fired one bullet in the air to make sure it's not our soldiers. Then a fierce firefight began, about half an hour. We're in. They are outnumbered, even approaching our direction. And the tank, which came out of the sector and made all this trip on the route, actually coming. I'm getting on the tank.
The brigade commander entered my tank. He told me they were fired on from the north, and that there are terrorists all over, in all the trees north of us. I immediately loaded my stuff. The whole team just told me that they identified terrorists, and we started shooting. Starting by firing machine guns at terrorists who are closer to us, and we continued to fire shells at the terrorists a bit further away. I saw the hits. I saw them fall.
Hilla and I stayed in on the vehicle. Tal to operate all communication devices, understand the situation to help the brigade commander with communications. Hilla and I are on Route 232. I sat in the driver's seat, Hilla sat in the Killer, which is the system of the heavy machine gun. She actually told me that she recognized a number of terrorists there, that I should open the window for her to be able to fire.
It is important to say that none of us knew how to use it. It's a system that no one knew how to use. It's a qualification you have to pass in the army. None of us knew. In about 10 minutes, we all became experts. We knew exactly how to operate it, how to shoot it, how to maneuver every lever. Just learning, like that in the field, at that moment, how to deal with a situation. As soon as 50 terrorists passed you, and you watch videos, and you know that the route axis is threatened by anti-tank weapons and RPGs and terrorists in every corner, so of course you say, well, maybe I'll be the next victim in a second.
At this point, while fighting, when they encountered dozens of terrorists and eliminated them, the company commander, Captain Kari, dispatched a third tank from Nitsana, commanded by Sergeant Ophir. Now, there were 3 tanks with armor.
And what balanced the weight was seeing 50 terrorists flocking in my direction, towards the vehicle, towards the killer, towards the tank. There, Michal began to make contact with the enemy.
From the moment Carney told me to get on the Philadelphia route and drive towards Gaza, I understood that this was a serious matter, not something we do every day. A feeling of adrenaline in the body, to prepare the team, prepare it for the real thing that we're going to do.
After about 2 hours of fighting, so my sergeant's tank, which was a little further south of me, coming to me and my platoon commander went into my sergeant's tank, and we were fighting, me and my platoon commander, both tanks together, and we attacked the fence. We saw, first of all, the rows of trees with burnt terrorists. You see the bodies of the terrorists, and we reached a breach in the fence.
I attacked, machine gun fire, ensuring the destruction of everything around. And if we thought that 50 terrorists was supposedly the end, it was only the beginning. We understood that there are apparently hostages there, terrorists inside the kibbutz. I leave the platoon commander's tank there, and I tell her, no matter what comes from that route, you open fire. You have permission. If in doubt, of course check. But no matter what comes from the north to the south, you fire. And movement begins with the brigade commander. The driver actually identified 2 terrorists and reported to me that she recognizes 2 terrorists. And I told her, just run them over. She ran over them and moved on and prevented more of them coming. We got to the entrance of the settlement and saw the gate closed, and a soldier came to me. Like such a blur, running to me in a panic, raised his hands and shouted, "Terrorists, terrorists! Enter the kibbutz, terrorists!" And we broke into the place, took the momentum with the tank, broke the yellow gate. The hand of that soldier pointed and said, "Look, there's a shell there, there's terrorists there." I asked him, "Are there civilians there?" He said, "I don't know, fire a shell there." I decide not to shoot a shell there. We're talking about an Israeli community. I fired machine guns into the entrance of the house.
The tank fired, both machine guns and shells, even within the community. Basically a very complex fight. The terrorists did not fight the tank. They fought, and when the tank came, they either ran or they died.
The fighting continued there until around 8 in the evening, until we made sure the area was clean, that the community was safe, and you evacuated the civilians.
Was this the first time you shot people, terrorists?
I feel like it was exactly how I prepared for it in training. There are exercises for everything, and just doing what the mind knows and what the hands know.
You saved a lot of lives in Cholit, in the end, including the whole kibbutz.
Right. When you're at that moment in the event, you don't think, wait, I'm saving him. I'm saving this house. You understand that there's a terrorist here, and I must kill him before he reaches one of my communities.
How many hours in a row did you fight?
Around 17 hours.
Inside the tank?
Yes.
The female tankers who came with their tanks basically broke the attack in both places that the tanks came directly under terrorist fire. The terrorists were mostly eliminated, and those who weren't just fled because they realized they had no chance. and the girls inside the tanks, the fighters, with 3 tanks at this stage of the attack. They fought brilliantly, fought in a way that they were apparently not even trained for, carried on shooting inside Israeli communities, drove on roads, and I think thanks to these actions, an attack further south was also prevented. All the settlements in the Hevel Shalom area, no terrorists reached them. Thanks to the arrival of the troops from the Paran Brigade and the tankers, which were so significant at this stage of the attack.
You kept saying heroines and history, and I personally don't feel like a hero. I feel that I'm a warrior who has been given orders, and she did her job, and I believe that anyone would do it.
We're the only female tank fighters in the world, very skillful, very professional.
There are no other armies that have...
No. There are no other Western armies at all that have female tank fighters in them. It's really a chapter in history, something huge. Both girls in armor and warriors in general charged, covered, functioned, treated the wounded in an inspiring way.
So is that old debate behind us?
I think it is no longer relevant. After this war, it will be clear. Also the need, and also the proof of the clear ability that was here.
Chief of Staff, Major General Herzi Halevi, found time yesterday in the middle of fighting to meet the tankists who made history. He knows that after what they did on the 7th of October, the debate about integrating women into the armed corps is over. These girls proved the women in the tank will win.
Yes, the women in the tanks, Dani Ayalon.
Well, you know, I served in tanks for about 25 years, you know, three and a half years of my regular army, and then in reserve I made captain in the Armored Corps, the deputy commander of a company of tanks. So it's exhilarating to see, you know, there is a lot of, I would say, power when you've
never seen women in the tanks.
No, in my time, no way. To see that, I think it's really inspiring to see that, and I can tell you that to operate a tank is not so difficult. Unlike the Soviet-made tanks, I used to work on the American-made tanks and the American-made tanks were all automatic. It's just like, you know, running a car, very easy. But where does it come to? You need really force and power is for all the treatments. You know, if you need to change your whatever wheels there, or sometimes to clean the cannon and inside. And for that, what I understand, and this is something which really is remarkable, that those girls who were trained to work on the tanks, before that, they were examined to see if they're physically fit. And not only that, they were going through some training, you know, in Wingate, which is the Israeli, let's say, college for sports. So they were told how to lift heavy stuff in the right way, not to hurt their backs, not to hurt their muscles. So I think when you do it right, you get good results.
Yeah, that is definitely something of a first in Israeli IDF. We're looking at Rafah crossing, still waiting for some news from there, and we'll be right back with more special coverage here at I-24 News.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds.
We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front line, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
Welcome back to our special coverage here on I-24 News. We are expecting 10 more Israeli hostages to be freed shortly. You're looking at the Rafah border crossing between the Gaza Strip and Egypt. That's where the Red Cross is supposed to bring in 10 Israeli hostages. Guy, Israel, mostly women tonight.
Yes,
or all of them women, actually.
We cannot reveal the identity of those women yet, but we're talking about one minor, 17-year-old girl, and the rest 9 Israeli women in various ages, by the way. Until now, we've only seen minors under the age of 19 and very elderly women. In this list, several women who are not as old, obviously, as the stockpile, so to speak, of Hamas, of Israeli hostages is slowly going down when it comes to Israeli civilians, women, elderly, etc. So we are starting to see younger women as well. We have yet to see any men over the age of 19, with the exception of that one Israeli-Russian national.
Right, but still, there are babies and women in captivity.
Absolutely.
Still.
So as young as a 10-month-old baby will not stop reminding the world of young Kfir Bibas still in Hamas captivity.
Right. I-24 News' Zach Anders is standing by at the Kerem Shalom crossing, which is on Israeli soil. What's the latest there?
Well, we're still waiting for the arrival. We're still waiting for the actual crossing of the Red Cross from that Rafah crossing into northern Egypt. This is expected to be taking place soon, but we will not know for certain until our cameras are able to see that convoy of white vehicles with the big Red Cross up front of the hood, which has been the scene that we've seen over the last several days, of course, but this latest is on the backs of a new deal, a new exchange for 2 additional days, 48 hours worth of these, the extension of the ceasefire, rather. 10 hostages supposedly set to be released tonight. Of course, that won't be confirmed until the moment that they are in Israeli hands. And the list that was provided by Hamas can then be confirmed that the individuals that were told would be handed over were, in fact, handed over today. And then we will have the ability to know more.
Right. Zach, thank you very much for that. Please stand by for more news over there. I-24 News' Owen Alterman is at the Sheba Medical Center in the center of Israel, one of the biggest, or maybe even the biggest hospital in Israel, also expecting some hostages tonight. Owen.
Yeah, that's right, Jacob. Just some word just in from the hospital, expecting 8 out of the 10 hostages to be brought here, and through a different procedure, according to the hospital, rather than stopping at Hatzerim Air Base in the south, as has happened in previous days. These freed hostages and soon-to-be patients are expected to be flown by helicopter directly from the Kerem Shalom crossing into Israel, directly from there by helicopter to the hospital complex, and then from the helipad brought by ambulances to the spot behind me and then brought into the hospital. The hospital also says that it's expecting the timing to be much faster than it was, for example, yesterday, in the sense that they are expecting these patients to be here over the next hour or two. So within the next hour or two, the patients actually to be arriving here at the hospital. 8 out of the 10 hostages all of them women, expected to come here to Sheba to be hospitalized here. Jacob, this is a hospital, as you mentioned, maybe the most prominent in Israel, sometimes ranked among the best hospitals in the world even, and has had experience over the past few days taking care of hostages and had them be hospitalized here. So at any rate, 8 of the 10 hostages, all of those 8 being women, expected to be here at Sheba Medical Center within the next hour or two, brought directly from the Kerem Shalom crossing by helicopter, and then the ambulance is coming to the spot behind me.
All right, Owen, thank you very much. Keep us updated. Back to the studio here, Ambassador Dani Ayalon, former Israeli ambassador to Washington. We are seeing the United States involved very much in what's happening. Secretary Blinken is on his way basically to Israel. The head of the CIA is in Qatar right now, and also the head of Mossad. What's cooking, in your opinion?
Well, the U.S. will not be engaged just for, let's say, bits by bits of rescuing the hostages for continuation of ceasefire. They would like to see a way out the day after. They are already thinking about it, and they have more than hinted to the Israeli government and to the Israeli Prime Minister that they would expect to see some plan coming out of Israel. If not, they will provide the plan. The details, of course, are not yet revealed. I think they're still working on it. It's not going to be easy, but one thing is certain. The principles are few. First of all, Hamas will no longer be in control of Gaza. Secondly, is Israel will not occupy Gaza. Thirdly, they would like to see a revitalized Palestinian Authority. Now, there is the wiggle room here is what is revitalized mean? Just personalities? Do you need to change the culture? A lot to be seen.
Right. Let's go to Mike Wagenheim, I-24 News Syrian senior U.S. correspondent at the UN. Mike, give us the update from there. How do things look from the Washington perspective at this moment?
Washington is essentially getting what it needs out of the UN right now, which is breathing room for Israel. And the ceasefire, the humanitarian pause, whatever you'd like to call it, has certainly drawn that process out the way that America had initially intended. They're getting hostages back, including American hostages for that matter. They're seeing more humanitarian aid flowing into Gaza. A pair of senior administration officials briefed I-24 News and other reporters yesterday on plans to increase humanitarian aid steadily and consistently with Israeli help for that matter. So as far as utilizing the UN and utilizing American veto power here, I think the Biden administration has played this pretty deftly. They've kept the pressure away from Israel, at least pressure that matters in terms of the Security Council, and then gave them some breathing room to take care of their operations up north, and now allowing more humanitarian aid to filter through into the south while this pause drags on here at least for a few more days.
Right. Now, the U.S. is apparently telling Israel to exercise maximum efforts not to produce further significant displacement of civilians in Gaza. That means more or less ending the military operation.
Not necessarily. So yes, they don't want to see, and they said they were very clear with the Israeli government, and they said the Israeli government was receptive to these concerns, that they don't want to see what took place in the north replicated in the south, which means no safe zones, no humanitarian zones. Everybody should feel comfortable in their own home. However, if they don't, there will be designated areas, whether they're UN shelters, other tents, what have you, that are delineated so the Israelis know exactly where they are, that they won't come under any danger just in case there is activity elsewhere. It doesn't mean by any stretch of the imagination that the military operation is over. It does mean, however, that there will be more pressure on the Israeli government to try to minimize casualties and to show definitive proof that areas that they are striking, that they are hitting terrorist targets. The Israeli government has said that they are going after terrorists and they're hitting them hard. However, when pressed for numbers on the matter, they haven't been able, and it's not, it's the fog of war, they haven't been really able to show percentages or hard numbers as to how many Hamas terrorists they're killing versus civilian casualties. So I think that's where the pressure comes on, not to stop the military operation, but to be more selective in their targeting, to make sure that they can show the U.S. through intelligence and other matters that they are striking the right targets where dangerous Hamas terrorists are gathered. America's not asking for perfection here. They don't expect civilian casualties to go to zero in the second part of this operation, but they would like to see it certainly minimized as much as possible going forward.
And that's the message that Secretary Blinken is bringing with him.
No doubt whatsoever. It's really a three or maybe fourfold message that Blinken is bringing. Number one, make sure humanitarian aid is getting in and everybody's on the same page with that. Number two, finding ways to free more hostages. Number three, making sure Israel and the region, for that matter, has a plan for the day after Hamas. And number four, making sure this doesn't spill over into a wider Middle East conflict. So not only visiting Israel, but visiting the Palestinian Authority, though there's not a whole lot of pull they have in this day and age, and then going to Dubai, not just for a climate conference, but I think more so to make sure that he's speaking with as many regional leaders as possible and everybody can voice their concerns and also offer potential solutions here going forward. This is not going to be, obviously a 1 or 2 week operation, months. And when we're talking about, reconstructing Gaza, years going forward here. Blinken wants some commitments both in the short, medium, and for that matter, the long term from regional players here.
Right. Mike Wagenheim in New York, thank you very much for that. Yeah, the climate summit, almost forgot about that. Back to you, Ambassador Ayalon. There's the question of the northern part of Israel, namely Hezbollah in Lebanon. If the Americans are trying to fold things here, there will have to be a solution for what's happening there up north.
Sure, otherwise the Israelis who live there will not go back. They have said so. The town mayors, the regional council directors, they have said if there is no solution to the situation in the north, that means Hezbollah cannot be on the border, smack dab to the fences of the towns and kibbutzim and the villages. There is no life there. So Israel has no other choice but to make sure that the situation changes fundamentally. Now, how do you do it? We do have a political tool, Jacob, and that is United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701, 2006, following this, the one that actually ended the Second Lebanon War. And according to this Security Council resolution, Hezbollah should be pulled back north of the Litani River, which means at least about 20 miles a buffer from our towns, our border town communities in the north. I'm sure, by the way, we already saw that Israel is gearing up towards that, preparing the case, and the Israeli foreign minister basically sent a letter to the Security Council to that effect, that 1701 should be now adhered to the letter and to the spirit. Well, to the letter, maybe. To the spirit, I'm not sure, because it also called for the disarming of Hezbollah. And this, I don't think, will happen.
Right. We're getting some footage from Gaza right now showing apparently the hostages, the 10 Israeli women being transferred to the Red Cross. Apparently, this is a short clip we're getting. Yeah.
We cannot confirm, certainly cannot see the Israeli hostages there, but these certainly are the Hamas vehicles on the way to the Red Cross, according to the information that we received. Obviously, followed with these well-armed and well-hidden Hamas terrorists. Another point to mention here from the hostages that were released, that their way from the Khan Yunis area towards Rafah was just as scary as the rest of their journey and the time in captivity, because they were met with a crowd that was throwing stones and other materials at their cars. They feared that they will be actually lynched by that crowd. More and more horrors. And to speak about that, more information comes in about the way those Israeli hostages were held in the tunnels. We're hearing from some of the children that were held in the tunnels about the atrocities that were committed. We're hearing from the aunt of 12 years old, Eitan Yahalomi, about how was he received in Gaza. Well, upon his arrival in Gaza, he was beaten by many Gazan civilians on the streets of Gaza. This was his welcome after being kidnapped. He's also saying Hamas has forced him to watch horror visuals of the massacre committed in the kibbutzes. You can just imagine what does that do to a 12-year-old boy that has no protection, no parents around him, no way to even begin to understand the situation when he sees his entire communities being destroyed. What does that do to him? And we also hear from him that whenever he attempted to say something, he was threatened with a gun, with a weapon. So these are the terrible conditions under which those Israeli children were held. We also hear from the father of 9 years old, Emily Hand. He says when she got back, he had a difficult time speaking to her because she was only whispering. This is what she was taught to do there. She could not raise her voice. He had to put his ear right in front of her mouth to understand what she was trying to say. He says you could see the horror in her eyes. He says she learned how to say in Arabic, keep quiet, to another girl that was held with her, as they were both terrified of these terrorists. These were the conditions under which these children were held in Hamas captivity.
And this is just the beginning of stuff coming out. We'll have probably much more. I want to ask you, Ambassador Ayalon, about the Palestinians that are being released, the prisoners, as part of this deal, being accepted as heroes. And by that, Hamas scoring points within the West Bank Palestinians, Jerusalem Palestinians, and even Israeli Palestinians to some sort today, because Israeli Palestinians were part of the deal.
Yes, and we see actually the sentiments in the Palestinian street is for Hamas, much over the Palestinian Authority. Abu Mazen seems like a leader of the past. Well, he's 88 years old. Everybody is waiting for a new leadership over there. But Fatah as such, and the Palestinian Authority even more so, they seem to be not only ineffective, but also very corrupt. Some of them accuse them, with cooperating with Israel, just by actually trying to maintain law and order in the Palestinian territories. And Hamas, probably, if there were elections, would win big also in the West Bank, in the Palestinian Authority areas. And they could take over the Palestinian Authority in no time. Actually, only Israeli security presence in areas A and B and in the towns of the Palestinians is what keeps the Palestinian Authority intact and Abu Mazen in control. Without Israeli security forces over there, it would become Hamastan, or an area, Hamas land, in no time.
Now, President Biden was talking about a new Palestinian Authority in Israel as well. There was talk about that. What does it mean?
Well, it's tricky. I'll tell you why. Because what he's doing actually is pulling from the history what George Bush suggested, President Bush, in 2004, following the Defensive Shield operation, when it was understood by everyone that Hamas is Arafat, Yasser Arafat was the problem, not the solution. He has to be put out. The way to put him out was in a gentle way, to push him aside and bring who? Abu Mazen. And here we are, 20-some years later, and we saw that nothing changed. So when we talk about a new or a revitalized authority, that means not just a new face, but a totally new policies, fighting terror, stopping the incitement, changing the curriculum in school. This is what Israel should demand, at the least, in order to have Palestinian Authority moved into Gaza.
Guy?
I'm going to read you a tweet from an Israeli lawmaker. We'll get to his identity after we finish reading what he says. He, first of all, speaks about the execution of 2 Palestinians in the city of Tulkarem over the weekend. They were accused of collaborating with Israel, and then they were murdered and hanged on an electric pole. And he says, even if you are among those who separate between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas and see the Palestinian Authority as a solution, you still need to be asked the following question. If the Palestinian Authority is not even able to control what is done in its own territory, how is it supposed to successfully control the Gaza Strip? That statement not coming from a member of Zionist power, from Smotrich power, religious Zionism. This comes from Idan Rol. He's a member of Yesh Atid, a party led by Yair Lapid, the same person who insists that the Palestinian Authority is the one that needs to control the Gaza Strip at the end of this war. I think, first of all, it's a very bold statement from a lawmaker from Yesh Atid. We saw what happens to some lawmakers that voice a different opinion from that of the leader of Yesh Atid. But beyond that, an understanding in wider circles of the political spectrum in Israel as to the fact that the Palestinian Authority that continues to incite for terror, that has no control over the terror groups in its own territory, that continues to pay salaries to Palestinians who murder Israelis, that is a problem to assign them as the keepers of Gaza.
Okay. Meanwhile, Israel has seen a tremendous wave of civil volunteering since the war began, but apparently not only from within. They come from abroad as well. Here's I-24 News' Emily Francis.
This is not the supermarket.
Tell us, explain what it is you're doing.
I'm putting a date on gauze. Yay, team. Okay.
But it's a super important volunteer job that could mean the difference between life and death.
So we do what they say, and it gets done, and we save a life. Everything saves a life. That's why we're here.
During times of peace, and even more so during war, the Tel HaShomer IDF base is the hub where all the medical supplies and other non-combat support tasks fuel the entire IDF.
I love seeing all these people volunteering for Sarel. They are coming from out of the country and doing really holy work here, which is why this place exists.
Well, the fatigues came with the ticket. What brings me here is that after October 7th, we all, I think everyone here, felt the need to be here, just where we had to be. For myself, I was doing a whole bunch of work fighting against the insane explosion of anti-Semitism that's happening everywhere, even in our little city of Winnipeg. But it didn't feel like it was enough. I wanted to do something physical, really to help Am Yisrael.
After October 7th, lawyer Lawrence Pinsky of Winnipeg and dozens of other volunteers heeded the call and hopped on the first plane to Israel that they could to participate in Sarel Volunteers for Israel, a robust nonprofit with an international reputation.
Well, I've been packing, not right now, but earlier, morphine and ketamine and amputation bandages and serious stuff. And it gives you a sense, especially when you see how many we're packing, what our Chayalim are really facing.
Like everyone else that is here, our desire to help Israel in any way we can, in addition to donations, and pardon my emotion, we're here to physically help Israel in this time of special need.
My Zaidi came to fight in the War of Independence in '48, and if I get to do 1/10 of what he did for the state of Israel, and he did it for all of us, and he did it so it would be here for me, if I could do 1/10 of what he did, I'll be very proud.
I have 2 sons right now who are in Miluim. One of them up north, one of them in the Merkaz, and I have a son-in-law who's up north.
Sarel, which is a Hebrew acronym meaning Service for Israel, has recruited over 150,000 volunteers from over 30 countries since its inception 40 years ago.
I graduated college at the time of the Six-Day War in '67. I wanted to come then. My family was not Zionistic. I knew they would probably commit me if I came. I heard about Sarel when I was visiting my son in Teaneck, New Jersey, and I said, oh my God, I can do today what I couldn't do 50 years ago.
This is now Rochelle Kimmel of Borough Park, Brooklyn's fourth SAR-L volunteer mission. And for Dina Wolf, who's originally from Manchester, England, SAR-L volunteers have already become her family.
This is your first day volunteering. Do you feel like you've known her forever already?
I just think she is just amazing. She's an inspiration, and I'm just in admiration. Everybody is doing as much as they can, but some of us have that feeling it's just not enough. So when my sister decided to come from Manchester to do SAR-L, I jumped on the bandwagon.
With the hate and vitriol against Jewish people hitting a critical juncture around the world, the existential fear is paralyzing.
We've been through an awful lot in the United Kingdom being Jewish. There is an awful lot of anti-Semitism. I had been racially hounded on social media. I had had eggs thrown at my car.
Jenny Sadeh, who was active on social media, has been nearly silenced to the point that she's had to change her profile name. And she even feels safer in Israel during wartime than in the UK.
I walk in the streets, I hide my Star of David. What I'm trying to say is usually I'm very proud and very happy to wear my flag. This time it's very scary. I feel like I needed to be here, and I'm very glad I am. It's been very rewarding.
As you can see, men and women of all ages and nationalities are united for a common cause, fulfilling our soldiers' medical needs while also filling their souls in the Jewish homeland.
It's very disturbing. My son said to me, "You're not going to want to listen to the news stations that you've been listening to when you come home." And it's very depressing.
Anybody who has the ability to be here should definitely take the plunge and come. This is where we need to be. It's our country.
At the Tel Shomer IDF base, Emily Francis, I-24 News.
Gazriel, back to you with the latest news.
Right, so confirmation just over the past minute from Israeli officials that the 10 Israeli hostages set to be released today are in the hands of the Red Cross and will be making their way into Israel. We're talking about 10 hostages, all women, one of them a minor, 17 years old, the rest older women, but also not just elderly women. This is day 53 of the war and day 5 of the pause in the fighting as part of this deal between Israel and Hamas. The first day of the 2-day extension already agreed upon between Israel and Hamas, and 2 more days in the making.
And in Qatar, Ambassador Ayalon, efforts for a bigger deal.
Yes, and I guess we will not know until it's just all the way down to the wire. It's going to be like a torture, Chinese experience, unfortunately. And our hearts go with the kidnapped and their families.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Guy. Stay tuned for more special coverage here on I-24 News with Benita Levin. Meanwhile, have a good night from Tel Aviv.
Israel is in a state of war.
Families completely gunned down in their beds.
We have no idea where is she.
As our soldiers are fighting on the front line, but the general perception is something that certainly needs to be fought as well.
This is Breaking News Edition. I'm Benita Levine. 10 more Israeli hostages held by Hamas terrorists for more than 7 weeks are on their way home. 9 adult women and 1 teenage girl. Day 53 of the war. The 4-day truce has been extended by 48 hours. During that time, 2 sets of hostages are set to be freed from captivity in Gaza after being abducted during the terror onslaught in southern Israel on the 7th of October. Since the initial truce came into effect on Friday, 69 hostages have been released, including foreign nationals. There was an attack on Israeli troops in northern Gaza earlier in the day, but the truce appears to still be in force. At least 160 people remain in captivity, with the nation hoping that more children and their mothers will be freed. Relatives from this latest group of hostages have been notified. There is still no confirmation on the whereabouts of the youngest hostage, Kfir Bibas, who was 9 months old at the time of the terror assault and abduction. There were reports overnight that he, his 4-year-old brother Ariel, and their mother Shiri had been handed by Hamas to another terror faction in Khan Yunis in southern Israel. A 10-month-old baby still in captivity. Unimaginable. So, to start our broadcast, let's go straight to our correspondent Pierre Steckelbach. She joins us from Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. And Pierre, they're coming home. The process underway for the latest group of 10 hostages, 9 adult women and 1 teenage girl. They should get to see their families again soon, certainly in the next few hours. What is happening there? What is the response?
Right, Benita. Well, here in Tel Aviv, there is still family members of those who are not expected to be released tonight. And you already mentioned the Bibas family, the 10-month-old baby Kfir, who is the youngest hostage and has sort of become the symbol of the hostages there, who's still being held captive together with his 4-year-old brother and his parents Shiri and Yarden, who are not on the list. And as you mentioned, they're believed to not being held by Hamas, which will make a possible deal to get them released even more difficult. And family members were here earlier today holding a press conference parents, and they were demanding first and foremost from the Red Cross to get access to the family, all the others that are still being held hostage in Gaza, to attend to their medical needs. And they were also saying that they need to bring about their immediate release as soon as possible, as they were quite disappointed that although we speak about 2 children of that family, they were not on any list as of now. They were releasing orange balloons, orange, the color that resembles the hair color of the children, that has become quite characteristic for really that specific family, as we're talking about an entire family that has been taken hostage now. Earlier, we also had the chance to speak to Yair Moses. Yair Moses is the son of Margalit, who was released among the first hostages already on Friday night. We've been hearing from him that his mother is doing relatively well, but that his father, Gadi, is still being held captive in Gaza. And Yair was telling us that we need to speak more about the men that are still being held captive there. He thinks there's not enough talk to bring about a quick release of the men as well. And earlier, we also saw support for a different Israeli who is being held in Gaza, the Ethiopian Israeli Avera Mengistu, who crossed into Gaza in 2014 when he was just a little bit older than 20 years. Avera Mengistu was suffering from a mental illness and crossed into Gaza, but I spoke to a supporter who explains why this is the time to speak more about this issue as well. Benita, let's take a listen.
Now is the opportunity to talk about him, say his name out loud so they know his story and bring him home. Today, not yesterday, not the day before, today. He was held captive by Hamas for 9 years. No one talks about him, but the media does not cover his story. They forget his family, who's been waiting 9 years for their son.
And as we've been discussing, 160 hostages still in captivity. We wait to find out what will happen next. Thank you so much, correspondent Pierre Stekelbach, live from Tel Aviv. Thank you, Pierre. Meanwhile, details of the conditions in captivity are emerging. The aunt of freed hostage Eitan Yahalomi has told French media how Hamas showed the 12-year-old boy videos they took on the 7th of October, including the attacks at his kibbutz. He was beaten, and he and other children had guns pointed at them when they cried in captivity. At times, he was detained alone. Over and above this trauma in captivity, Eitan had seen his father wounded in a gun battle outside their home during the terror onslaught. His dad, Ohad, is still being held hostage. And Thomas Hand, the father of 9-year-old Emily, says she thought she had been held hostage for a year. He has told CNN how she now cries herself to sleep. And 78-year-old Ruti Munda telling Israel's Channel 13 News that she spent all her time in captivity with her daughter and grandson. He turned 9 while being held hostage by Hamas. They slept on plastic chairs, an account confirmed by other freed hostages. And she says she was fed well in the beginning, but then food started running out. Welcoming to studio for more, Yaakov Lapin, military and strategic affairs analyst at the Jewish News Syndicate and the Miriam Institute, and our senior editor, Guy Azriel. Thank you both for being here. Devastating hearing all these emerging details, but I want to start with you, Guy, because we know right now that 10 hostages are on their way home, and we're going to be finding out more details. We know that their family has been notified, and to that point about the long road home, let's check in with our correspondent, Zach Anders. He joins us from the Kerem Shalom crossing. So the hostage release process happening. It's a 5th day in a row. This group of 10 hostages handed over to the Red Cross. We're hearing, what is the latest? What can you share?
Well, there may have been a little bit of a snag. We're seeing reports that there are crowds in Rafah that are surrounding the vehicles, the Red Cross vehicles. This is unconfirmed, and we're waiting for media and images that can correlate this. But right now, a lot of social media activity posting, claiming that these Red Cross vehicles are having a difficult time getting out of southern Gaza and reaching the Rafah crossing. Of course, we've talked about this the last several days, the complications of so many people in this area, and that the Hamas exchange to the Red Cross happens sometimes several kilometers deep beyond the Rafah crossing, then these Red Cross vehicles have to travel independently on their own a great distance to get to the crossing. So it's still not out of the woods yet, and we still have not seen these 10 hostages reach the crossing with that intermediary, with the Red Cross, before they can cross into Egypt and then be provided to the IDF and finally be in Israeli hands.
Well, that certainly is a concern to hear. There is potentially some kind of hiccup. Give us an understanding. We know this process has unfolded for several days now, how it is likely to unfold once they do hopefully get to the Rafah crossing. What happens next, Zach?
Well, this is a process that involves so many other parties. They will, once the Red Cross reaches the crossing, this is controlled on the Egyptian side. So it will be up to the Egyptians to open the gate and secure that access point, because remember, there are large crowds, scores of people surrounding this crossing that would like to get out of southern Gaza and reach Egypt. Egypt has been preventing any of the refugees or potential refugees or the people of Gaza from leaving southern Gaza and entering into Egypt, entering into the Sinai. So they will have to control this checkpoint. Once those Red Cross vehicles pass and are on the Egyptian side, that is when we believe the transfer takes place into Israeli vehicles, and then they have about a 2-mile-long journey across a rough, sometimes dirt road to that goes along the border fence. This is access road that is secured by the Egyptians and the IDF. They travel along this road to reach our location, the Kerem Shalom crossing, where they cross fairly easily without any need for a stop. They just keep on rolling through. The gate is wide open, and then they continue on their journey to the north to a hospital to be received for further evaluation. I'm told that they are picked up and that they are basically on the move immediately once that transfer takes place.
Well, we certainly will be checking back in with you for the latest developments. For now, thank you very much to our correspondent, Zach Anders, from the Kerem Shalom crossing. Thank you, Zach. So, Guy, as we spoke about very briefly before we spoke to Zach, we were expecting this transfer to happen very soon, and obviously the families have been notified. There are families of 10 hostages who will be waiting, hopefully very soon, to be reunited with their relatives. Talk us through what we know so far.
Actually, we're talking about 9 families, because 2 of those to be released are actually a mother and daughter. In this batch of hostages to be released, we have only 1 minor. She's 17 years old. The rest are women above the age of 19. That is now the first day of the first extension of that deal between Israel and Hamas. I think we can see a map on our screens very soon, where we will see how this transfer is actually taking place. The hostages are being released in the area of Khan Yunis that was in the most part of these hostage release deals, with the exception of 1-2 days ago, where hostages were released in the northern point of the Gaza Strip through the Karni crossing. In this case, again, we're in the south. According to what we heard from Zach as well now, those hostages are making their way on Red Cross vehicles towards the Rafah crossing, where they will cross into Egyptian territory. There, for the first time, they will meet representatives, Israeli representatives. They will validate their identity, give them a very initial medical examination. From there, they make their way into the Kerem Shalom crossing point. That is where finally they will be on Israeli soil. And from there, depending on their medical condition, we know that in one case earlier this week, a very seriously ill woman, Elma Avraham, was rushed directly to a hospital because Hamas did not give her the medication she needed. She was in a very serious condition for several days. Finally, good news from the hospital this evening. Her condition has improved. She breathes on her own. Nonetheless, this is the first day of the 2-day extension, and as we speak about that, reports out of Qatar suggest that there is already another extension in the cards. 2 more additional days, again for 10 Israeli hostages, as we saw in these 2 days. Amid all these talks, there are talks about a much greater deal in the making. This is why the Israeli Mossad chief is in Qatar. He's meeting with CIA chief Bill Burns and with the Qatari Prime Minister later this evening. According to a report in the Wall Street Journal, that deal would include much greater concessions.
There's much to unpack about not only the concessions you've alluded to, Guy, but also the potential extension of the truce. But before we get there, Yaakov, many people have been waiting with bated breath to find out if Kfir Bibas, the symbol, in a way, of this tragedy right now, this hostage situation, a 9-month-old baby who was abducted with his brother and his mother on the 7th of October. There was much hope that he might be released. What we do know right now is that he is definitely not on the list, and there were these disturbing reports overnight that he may have been handed by Hamas with his family to another terror faction in Khan Yunis. We're going to unpack what that means, but first let's hear the urgent appeal from relatives on this day about exactly where the Bibas family are right now. Let's take a listen.
We have all of our family here, but not exactly everyone. We're missing Yaden, Shiri, Ariel, and Kfir. The 4 of them have been kept in Hamas captivity in Gaza for over 53 days. 53 days in which we don't know where they are being held, what is their condition, are they being fed enough, who is taking care of them, are they together, who is holding them, do they have showers, who makes them, who hugs them when they're crying. We know exactly where they are. Hamas took them, and Hamas is required to bring them back right now. The responsible for their health and their freedom is directly in Hamas's hands and is responsibility. The ceasefire allowed the return of people who became a part of our family, and we are glad for each and every one that came back to his family. We demand from the Israeli government to act and to return our family, together with all the other hostages, right now. Their life is in danger. Every day is a danger for them.
Who is hugging baby Kfir Bibas? A question so many across the country have been asking. Yaakov, what can you tell us about this report that another faction, another terror group could be holding him, his brother and his mother as we speak?
So the assessment in Israel is that Hamas controls 90% of the hostages that it's taken, and the remaining 10%, if Hamas really wants to get hold of them, it knows exactly what it needs to do. So Hamas appears to be playing games here and essentially buying insurance policies for itself. It knows that the country is holding its breath for this poor family. It knows that everybody in Israel wants to see this family come back as soon as possible. From the beginning, everybody's been praying for this family's return. The tender age of baby Kfir and his entire family, everybody wants them home. And Hamas knows this, and this is how Hamas operates, as an evil terrorist organization that employs psychological warfare, and their game plan now is to buy time to survive. And the more they think that they can extort Israel and cause a delay in the resumption of military operations, that in their view serves their goal. This is what we're seeing here.
So if the Mossad chief, David Barnea, is in Qatar and these high-level meetings are happening, how pressing is it? What kind of pressure are they putting on Doha to make sure that children and mothers are released together, as was part of the deal? It hasn't happened up until now in all cases.
They'll be putting massive amounts of pressure on Yehia Sinwar mainly. He's the decision maker here, as well as Mohammed Def and the inner Hamas circle. The Qataris are intermediaries, and they can apply pressure probably on the Hamas leadership that's in Qatar. But the final decision maker on the ground in Gaza right now is the inner circle of the Hamas terror army, the leader, Yehia Sinwar, Mohammed Def. These are the people who are making the final calls. And again, their goal is to buy time. That is their main goal. So long as they can keep providing, I think, 10 hostages a day, then there is a horizon for continuing this outline. But the minute that stops, I think Israel and the IDF are preparing themselves for a very rapid return to combat, based on the idea that not only will this promote the goal of setting up future opportunities for retrieving hostages, possibly, by the way, through eventually conducting negotiations with hostage holders directly and bypassing this very long circle. Because if the leadership starts crumbling, then it might be possible to make ad hoc deals locally to hostage holders, offering them a way out to Sinai, to Egypt, possibly in exchange for letting go of the hostages. Those kinds of opportunities would only become realistic once the military starts moving into southern Gaza. And the goal of dismantling Hamas, that has not been abandoned by Israel, and Israel has made that very, very clear.
We're going to unpack more of that right now. We are hearing that Israeli officials are confirming that this group of hostages, the 10 hostages, are in the hands of the Red Cross. The Israeli officials confirming as much just moments ago. So let's go to our senior correspondent, Owen Alterman. He joins us from Ichilov Hospital in Tel Aviv. So, Owen, 10 more hostages coming home. We heard that update now. They are with Red Cross officials. The fifth group to be set free since the truce started. 9 adult women and 1 teenage girl. What kinds of preparations are underway at Ichilov? What can you tell us?
Right. Well, Benita, we're here at Sheba Hospital in Ramat Gan, a hospital that has had experience, as have many Israeli hospitals, in taking in the hostages and in being able to treat them. And as you mentioned, 8 out of the 10 are coming here to Sheba Hospital. They are actually expected to come directly by helicopter here from the Kerem Shalom crossing. Had been expected by hospital staff to be here just about now or an hour from now. But realistically, Benita, given that the transfer to the Red Cross has just happened, it doesn't seem realistic to quite make that time frame. But it is true that they will not make a stop at the Hatzerim Air Force Base in the south, as has been true in previous days. They'll come directly by helicopter.
I'm going to stop you right now. Daniel Hagari, the IDF spokesperson, is talking.
Is it cruel terror group that doesn't allow the Red Cross to check the condition of the hostages? This is a moral duty to insist that the Red Cross does so. We will do everything
כדי להשיב את כל החטופים הביתה, בין אם במהלך של 3 חללי צה"ל.
We announced to the families of 3 fallen IDF families about their death. All 3 have fallen in the first day of the battles and were taken by Hamas. Their death was announced after concrete information was received. I wish to send my condolences to the bereaved families. Our hearts are with you at these difficult times. We will continue to follow you. Around noontime, 3 IEDs have detonated in the Gaza Strip. In one case, live fire was also executed. IDF forces fired back towards the source of the fire. If any of our enemies may think that this is a time to strike the IDF, he's wrong. The safety of our forces comes first. We're set in our operational lines, and any attempt to hurt our forces will be met with strong fire and determination. We will do everything at any given moment. We'll do the right thing for the state of Israel that serves the goals of this war. The IDF uses the day of the pause for its readiness and approving plans for the next stages. The IDF is prepared. The Chief of Staff in the Northern Command today met the heads of the communities. He marked the strength of those communities, telling them, you are the source of our power that enables us to continue and fight. The IDF is committed to ensure a different reality in the borders This is one of the goals of the war. Now I will take questions and then give a few statements in English about the hostages. Tonight it was reported of a new outline under which all the hostages will be released in return for terrorists. Is the operation of the IEDs a violation of the pause? As I said, today was a violation of the agreement. There are rules. We have our lines. We responded with heavy fire and we'll continue to do so to kill any terrorist that threatens the lives of our forces. Any terrorist that comes across our forces will die. The principle of the safety of our troops comes first. The IDF knows how to manage this. At the moment, we're moving also tonight, advancing towards release of more hostages. But what serves the effort to bring back the hostages? Well, the IDF will be able to deal with the operational conditions on the ground. As for a future deal, it is not on the table right now. There is what is agreed, what the government has approved, and this is how we operate until something else comes. Is the pause hurting the IDF troops? The IDF troops are vigilant, they're ready. We ensure that they switch between the shifts. We do the right training, getting new equipment, approving plans, and we ensure that the vigilance of our forces continues. How many hostages are in Gaza? I do not want to specify this information at this stage. We will finish the night and we'll update at the end of this night the data that we have at the end of this night. According to what happens tonight, how many will be released, and we will update this number later on. Each website has a different number. This is difficult for anyone involved. Why don't you update? We have the will. I updated at the start of my statement that we updated families of 3 fallen soldiers. We will learn the data. We're dealing with the families right now. I will not give information to the public before I give it to the families. We will go over this night and see if it doesn't hurt the security of the troops. If so, we will give more information. Now, a few words in English.
Inside Gaza, at this very moment, Hamas is holding our people hostage. Men, women, children, babies. We urge all people who care about women's rights, children's rights, human rights, the future of humanity to join us in calling for the immediate release of our hostages. Those who used their voices to denounce violence against Iranian women. Those who used their voices to denounce violence against Yazidi women. Those who used their voices to denounce the kidnapping of Nigerian schoolgirls and demand their return. Raise your voices. Speak up for our hostages who are silenced. Demand their immediate return. Right now, UN Women has launched a campaign to fight against gender-based violence called No Excuses. Yet, when it comes to the women and girls being held hostage by Hamas and other terror groups in Gaza, there has been silence. There is no excuse for silence. People who care about women's rights, children's rights, human rights, the future of humanity, should show it. Speak up. Demand the Red Cross see them. Speak up. Demand the immediate release. Demand their immediate release of all our hostages. The IDF will do everything to rescue the hostages. Thank you.
IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari delivering his daily briefing, day 53 of the war, an impassioned appeal at the end to women's rights groups, to human rights groups, saying there's no excuse for being silent. Speak up about the atrocities committed by Hamas, questioning why that hasn't happened. He also spoke about developments earlier on in the day in northern Gaza when Israeli troops were targeted. Yaakov Lapin is still in studio. What do you make of this truce and the violation, it seems, of what happened earlier, and how does it impact what is happening with the hostages?
This was a serious violation. The detonation of 3 explosives suggested it was coordinated, and somebody set those off when they saw that IDF forces were nearby, and then somebody opened fire from Hamas. So this looks like a very coordinated violation, and it's, as usual, it's Hamas inching towards what it wants, which is to send the message that it's still a fighting force, it's still a operational functioning terror army, but without bringing down the full wrath of IDF's firepower on it. And this is how it operates. It will try to take every benefit that it can possibly get while still reaping the benefits from the ceasefire. I don't think it will influence Israel's decision-making massively going forward, but I do think that it's important to keep in mind that this entire operational pause is on borrowed time.
I'm going to stop you right there because we do have confirmation just in now of the names of one of the hostages about to be released in the coming hours, 17-year-old Maya Limburg. 17-year-old Maya Limburg is being released. She is the only child as such in this group of 10. She is 17 years old. The other 9 hostages set to be released, said to be in the hands of the Red Cross as we speak, are all adult women. There is a picture on your screen right now. She is holding a dog, 17-year-old Maya Limburg. Yaakov, back to you. And there are so many questions right now. We are waiting for confirmation about the next group getting into Israeli territory, and that's when the country can have a collective sigh of relief as they make their way back to the arms of their loving loved ones.
Every 24-hour block has to be treated independently from what happened the day before. The fact that it worked the day before doesn't give us any assurances. But of course, we have very good reason to hope that very, very soon, the next 10 people who will be given a second life, enabled by the IDF's operational pressure and Israel's release of Palestinian terrorists, 10 more people are free. That is definitely something for the nation to celebrate while we continue to worry about the rest of the people. And again, the formula is ultimately simple. As long as we can keep getting 10 people out of the Gaza Strip, out of Hamas's horrific crime against humanity, a captivity, then this outline will continue to be worth it. And the minute that stops, that's when the war will resume. That's the formula, and I don't think it's going to change.
Having said that, we were speaking a little bit earlier about the tricks that Hamas is playing. And Guy, I want to bring you in here because there was much speculation and much hope that more children would be released. We are looking at live images on our screen right now. This is the Red Cross, and they are with the hostages, the group of 10 hostages set to come into Israel very soon. And we certainly, Guy, don't want to get into a situation where we are comparing which life, when, and who gets onto a list. When, having said that, there are children in captivity. They are separated from their fathers. They may well not know if other family members are alive or not. And we're hearing awful, awful accounts of what it is like in captivity. So the nation waiting for for more children to be released and released now?
Yes, first of all, this is something that Hamas has been doing for a very long time, separating families, attempting at least to release children without their parents. And we've seen at least one case in which a young girl was released without her mother, Hamas claiming not to have her in his possession. But when the family spoke to the young girl, she said, well, in fact, I was held with my mother the entire time until 2 days before I was actually released. The same goes for the claims of Hamas, as Yaakov alluded to here earlier, that it does not have possession of, I think we can see the list of Israelis that are being released today. These are the 10 women, one of them, Maya Limberg, that we just saw in that picture. She's being released together with her mother, Gabriela Limberg, and 8 other women. This is the next batch of the hostage release deal. We're expecting another 10 to be released tomorrow. And going back to our point, we are hearing of the atrocities committed by Hamas on the young children that were being held there. Today, we heard from the aunt of 12 years old, Eitan Yahalomi, and he told his family how upon his arrival in Gaza, he was beaten on the street by Gaza civilians, not just by Hamas operatives.
Guys, stay with us because we now do have that official list of hostages released from captivity today. That has been confirmed, with Qatar confirming overnight that the truce has been extended by 2 days. There had been an expectation more children would be freed. That is not the case, except for 17-year-old Maya Limberg, as we already discussed. Now the rest of the people on that list. Her mother, Gabriela Limberg, 59, is also being freed. Others set to come home shortly, hopefully, include 84-year-old Ditsa Hyman, Tamar Metzger, 78 years old, Noralyn Babadila, 60 years old, 75-year-old Ada Sagi, 53-year-old Meirav Tal, also on the list, Rimon Kirst, 36, Ophelia Reutmann, 77, and 63-year-old Clara Marman. Of course, huge relief for relatives of these 10 people said to be with Red Cross officials as we speak and hopefully about to make their way home. What do you make of what we are seeing right now, Yaakov?
Well, certainly we are seeing wonderful news for all of these individuals and their families. They have a second opportunity at life ahead of them. Children are missing on this list, as you've pointed out, and hopefully tomorrow we will see those that weren't on the list that were supposed to be on it. They will appear tomorrow. But again, I think, Israel needs to certainly be happy about every civilian that it's able to get out of there. And I think, again, Hamas is playing extremely cruel, cynical games with the people of Israel, knowing that the Bibas family is a family that's in the heart of our consciousness, and we want the family home as soon as possible.
This isn't the first time we are seeing one of the hostages in a wheelchair. This time it is an elderly woman. The last time we saw one of the hostages being freed in a wheelchair, it was a young girl, Yuval. This time, once again, the scene playing out. We are looking at armed gunmen with masks on. They are escorting the hostages through to the Red Cross. You are looking at these images on your screen. You can see once again, this is the release of the hostages. They are being handed over from Hamas terrorists, armed with masks on. And we are looking in a wheelchair at 84-year-old Ditsa Hyman being escorted. Can you imagine 84 years old, more than 7 weeks in captivity in Gaza, having been abducted on the 7th of October during that terror rampage by Hamas? One can only imagine what 84-year-old Ditsa Hyman has been through in that time, and it's something we were talking about just a little bit earlier. More and more details emerging, Guy, about the conditions that we're hearing from the freed hostages, people who have described really frightening, scary, terrifying situations, sleeping on plastic chairs, running out of food in some cases, and children having guns pointed at them when they cried.
You can see it on our screens right now. How heartwarming to see these armed terrorists, the compassionate armed terrorists walking that old lady on a wheelchair and the young girl with her dog. This is the theater of absurd of Hamas attempting to portray this image of being humane. Well, obviously, one can ask, why in the first place do you kidnap an 86-year-old woman? Why do you kidnap a 10-month-old baby? This is just abnormal, to say the least. So yes, we are getting the testimonies from those who return. We spoke about Eitan Yahalomi, the 12-year-old, who told his family how he was beaten on the street of Gaza by regular civilians. We're not talking about just the Hamas terrorists. And also many of the hostages that were returned in recent days say that on their way back to the border, their cars were met with rocks and other materials thrown at them. They fear they will be lynched. Just comes to show how much hate and brainwashing is on the streets of Gaza, how much of a threat was for their safety, that these Hamas terrorists are the ones that needed to defend them from the rioters on the street. Just lastly, we'll mention Emily Hand, 9 years old. She says, her father says, when he first met her, he couldn't understand what she was saying because she could only whisper. For over 50 days, she was not allowed to speak, only to whisper. He says he saw the horror in her eyes, and that the one thing she learned to say in Arabic was keep quiet. This is what she was told over and over again by these terrorists. This is what these children have been through. And one more word about Eitan Yahalomi. He was forced by Hamas terrorists, listen to this, to watch their horror footage, the horror films from the October 7th massacre. They made him watch how they slaughter innocent Israeli civilians. This is what they did to a 12-year-old boy who committed no crime other than being a Jewish Israeli.
Unimaginable. Yaakov.
The worst part of all this, I think, is, to us, the transparent and pathetic attempt by these jihadist barbarians to present themselves as, humanitarians. To us, it's a complete joke, and we see straight through it. There will be those morally confused in the West who have already demonstrated their gullibility, and they will start to say, well, maybe, they're not so bad. We've heard these voices already, and it's shocking that people can be that morally confused.
We are looking at live images on our screen right now. Surreal indeed. You are seeing hostages freed by Hamas just moments ago, handed over to the Red Cross. There had been an expectation more children would be free today. That is not the case, except for 17-year-old Maya Limberg. Her mother, Gabriela Limberg, 59, is also being freed, and others to come through. We just saw in the wheelchair earlier, 84-year-old Ditsa Hyman, 78-year-old Tamar Metzger, Noralyn Babadilla, 60 years old, 75-year-old Ada Sagi, Meirav Tal is 53, and also on the list, Rimon Kirsch, 36 years old, 77-year-old Ophelia Reutmann, and 63-year-old Clara Marman. They have been in captivity since the 7th of October, when Hamas gunmen attacked southern parts of Israel, kibbutzim, moshavim, a music festival, and abducted scores of civilians ranging in age from a 9-month-old baby to elderly Holocaust survivors, elderly peace activists, and have kept them in captivity for 7 weeks, Guy.
Confirmation now from IDF spokesman that representatives of the Red Cross have transferred those 10 Israeli hostages to Egypt through the Rafah crossing, together with 2 other foreign nationals, and the IDF is saying that they're making their way into Israel Israel through Egyptian territory to the meeting point with the Israeli forces at Kerem Shalom. There they will validate the identity of those Israeli hostages, and they keep updating the families of the hostages about the advancement of the hostages. Will of course update all of us once they're finally safely on Israeli soil once again.
And such a terrifying situation, Yaakov, because of course it's not clear how many of these people know exactly what happened to the rest of their family on the 7th of October. And we're hearing accounts now of the hostages who have been freed of different ages being briefed about what has happened on that day after they were abducted. You are looking at the new group of hostages, Israelis coming home. They are with the Red Cross, and you can see them getting into that van. And as Guy was explaining, they are coming through the Rafah crossing and are heading back home. Talk us through what's happening next.
Right, and just before that, so many of the children released in recent days have been torn away from their fathers, and their fathers remain in Hamas's horrific bondage. And I think that also, needs to be pointed out, that the fathers are being held as their children have been released. That is another war crime. That is another attempt by Hamas to set up this insurance policy, and it's just the latest, showcasing of, again, the jihadist barbarism, the jihadist savagery that is behind all of these scenes. What's going to happen next, according to the protocol that we've seen daily now for the past 5 days, is these civilians will be brought to an IDF base where they will be looked at medically, and initially they will be spoken to by military officials to make sure that they're okay at the most fundamental level, and then very quickly they'll be transferred to area hospitals, probably in the center of the country, and undergo thorough medical and psychological evaluation. And hopefully, if their physical condition is okay, they will begin the long journey of psychological recovery, which is going to take a very long time for any human being who has had to undergo this kind of traumatic experience.
Unbelievable. And as we heard from the IDF spokesperson Daniel Hagari, certainly many questions. Perhaps the women's rights groups watching these images right now have some comment to make. We are seeing elderly women being escorted by armed Hamas terrorists, handed over to the Red Cross. They are heading back home. Let's check in now with our correspondent Zach Anders. He joins us from the Kerem Shalom crossing, and a massive relief, of course, for the families of these 10 hostages. Zach, what is happening where you are? Talk us through the process.
Well, we're seeing more activity here at the crossing, and we are hearing that they are outside of Gaza. They have reached Egyptian hands, and that transfer to the Israelis is about to begin or is underway as we speak. We've been told to expect them to pass by vehicle from our position anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes from now. This is a process. It will involve a drive along the border fence from the Rafah crossing to this crossing here on the Israeli side, where those gates will be wide open and they'll be welcomed into Israel in a quick procession. The attempt is that they're going to try and drive them in a safe but fast manner towards the nearest hospital, rather to Hatzerim Air Base, where they can then be transferred to hospitals via helicopter. We have seen helicopters flying in the direction of the Rafah crossing. We have seen in previous days during these exchanges that some individuals have been taken by helicopter, others by van. It's dependent on their condition and how they fare in this process. It's a very fluid situation. They're waiting to see exactly how everyone is doing, what kind of immediate care they may need. There are doctors and trained professionals on hand ready to address a number of situations should they arise. But this is, again, really fluid. They're waiting to see what they can do for them. And the urgency that comes next is to get them out of Egypt and into Israel.
And of course, this all happening right now because the truce was extended for today and tomorrow. So very likely, all being well, more hostages should be coming through around the same time tomorrow as well. Talk us through what is expected next.
And what happened earlier today was a glimpse inside how delicate this process is, with the IDF saying that they were fired upon and that the ceasefire was breached. But in principle, the ceasefire was maintained. The engagement did not turn into a large-scale battle with both sides firing back and forth. Israeli forces were injured, the IDF says, in that earlier exchange today. The question does become, if that was to happen again, how much further, especially when we are looking at tomorrow being the last day of this present agreement, that there will need to be an extension or some sort of new agreement to be able to extend further hostage releases and give potentially another 24 or 48 hours to life to this ceasefire. Should there be any complications, the immediate threat becomes that the hostage exchange falls off the table. We have not seen or any indication that that's not going to happen tomorrow, that the hostage release is going on as planned, but it's the extension beyond 24 to 48 hours that is still apparently being negotiated, and hopefully for the hostage families can be made true.
Thank you so much. We will be coming back to our correspondent Zach Anders from the Kerem Shalom crossing for more updates, of course, in the coming hours. Thank you so much. Now, if you're just joining us now, the official list of hostages released from captivity right now has been confirmed. There had been an expectation more children would be freed by Hamas. That is not the case today, except for 17-year-old Maya Limburg. Her mother, Gabriela Limburg, 59 years old, also being freed. Others coming home very soon include 84-year-old Ditsa Hyman. We saw her moments ago on a wheelchair being escorted and handed over to the Red Cross. Also, 78-year-old Tamar Metzger. Noralin Babadilla, age 60. Ada Sagi, 75. 53-year-old Meirav Tal. Rimon Kirst, age 36, 77-year-old Ophelia Reutmann, and 63-year-old Clara Marman, all on their way home very, very soon. And of course, our team will be tracking their progress as that journey back home happens, all after 7 unimaginable, harrowing weeks held captive by Hamas. Yaakov Lapin, I want to pick up on something Zach was talking about, and that is the potential for this truce to be extended to allow for more hostages to be allowed to come home in the way we are seeing on our screens right now, freed from terrorists. The pressure is on. Talk us through what the security risks look like as this truce potentially gets extended for yet another day and again another day.
So the IDF in the Gaza Strip has held its operational readiness at a very high level. It's kept up its positions, but it's transferred into what it describes as defensive positions, and that means fortifying themselves, ready to respond to any attack, as we've seen happen today, and they did respond, and shifting really from offense to defense, while at the same time some interesting things have been happening. They've begun operational review process, looking at what they can learn from the war so far, how they can improve once the war resumes, and it will resume. So that occurred as well as in Southern Command earlier today. There was a large forum of officers led by the Southern Commander, Yaron Finkelman, and they led a very comprehensive tactical and strategic review of how they can improve going forward. So the IDF is using this time not only to hold on to its achievements, but also to prepare for the next stages. And they're also thinking about that. And we've heard comments yesterday by Defense Minister Gallant, and he said, look, you're going to meet an enemy that's more ready, because Hamas, of course, has also been using this time to ready itself. So the Israeli response, according to Gallant, will be led first of all by air power, softening up those next areas, and then artillery shells, tank shells, D9 blades, he described them as, and then the IDF infantry will be moving in. So we're seeing the IDF fully utilize this time for the next stages of this war.
Now, of course, at the same time as this is all unfolding, and we're seeing the images on our screen right now, the Red Cross is with the hostages who are said to be coming back to Israel very soon. Of course, at the same time, Palestinian security prisoners are going to be released from Israeli jails, sent to the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Talk to us about the concerns on the security front when that happens. We know there has been a hero's welcome in Ramallah for several days now. Talk to us about the security concerns on that front.
Of course, it's not good when terrorists are released. I would just point out that when you look at the sort of the net assessment, the IDF in the past month has arrested around 1,000 Hamas members in the West Bank and hundreds of other members of terror organizations. So when you look at the numbers of new security prisoners versus those released, there are a lot more new prisoners than there are those that have been released. So, you know, Hamas can wave these releases around, but at the end of the day, it's actually its attack has resulted in over 1,000 new security prisoners, and I think that's very, very important to keep in mind. And of course, you know, the IDF and the Shin Bet will be keeping a close eye on those that have been released to make sure that they don't go back into terrorism, while the IDF's reinforced presence in the West Bank will be working to keep that arena stabilized.
At the same time, we are looking at images from just a short while ago, and they are dramatic images. Guy Israel, talk us through what we are seeing right now. Elderly hostages being freed, next to them armed Hamas terrorists. Break down what's happening.
If we see right, we're seeing also members of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad terror group. In another sign, if we're seeing right, of the cooperation between these two groups, and it goes back to the claims of Hamas of not having hold of all the Israeli hostages, as some of them are being held by other terror groups. Well, Hamas is a dictator. Well, Gaza is a dictatorship of Hamas. Hamas is in control of the Gaza Strip. It does allow other murderous terror groups to operate in its territory. Nonetheless, any claim of Hamas of not being able to reach Israeli hostages, well, Israel does not buy that. I want to speak now about what's happening in Qatar, because we're right now speaking about this first day of a 2-day extension at this moment. Meanwhile, reports that an extension of 2 additional days is in the cards. A principal agreement has been made for 2 more days in addition to these 2 that we're holding now, again releasing 10 Israeli hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners. But what is really on the cards now, according to the reports out of Qatar, is efforts by the Qataris to reach a much longer, much wider agreement, one that would see the release of all the Israeli hostages, including the Israeli soldiers. According to that statement, that would come with concessions that will be difficult for the Israeli public to swallow. I would add it's more like a gag reflex, because what this alleged agreement would entail is also releasing both thousands of Palestinian prisoners in exchange, but beyond that, the stopping of the Israeli ground operation in Gaza. Obviously, when Israel went out to this war that was forced on it with this Hamas onslaught, the goal was very clear: to eliminate Hamas's military capabilities in Gaza, to eliminate Hamas as a governing power over the Gaza Strip. Anything short of that will not satisfy any of the residents in the south, would not satisfy the people of Israel that want to see a clear change in the way the Gaza Strip is being run. We are already hearing reactions from Israeli officials, from Minister Smotrich. Such a deal is not on the cards. There's no discussion. The plan, this would be a plan to eliminate the state of Israel. We continue until victory. We also heard very similar things from even Minister Benny Gantz today, that this is a temporary pause and Israel will have to go ahead until victory. Again, going back to what Yaakov said, for Israel to achieve greater success in hostage release, to come at better conditions, well, it would require a much more aggressive military campaign in Gaza. What Israel has done so far, what the IDF has done so far in the northern part of the Gaza Strip is maybe 10, 20, 30% of what needs to be done. We see the Hamas is still in power, even in Gaza, in certain neighborhoods. So there's still a lot of work to be done. For now, Israel is saying no to any wider agreement that would see Hamas still remaining in power. No to that.
10 seconds, your parting words, Yaakov.
I fully agree with Guy's assessment. Israel's continuity hinges on the eventual destruction of the Hamas terror army. Everybody in Israel understands that. Hopefully, Israel's allies abroad will too.
Yaakov Lapin, military and strategic affairs analyst, thank you so much for your insight as always. Guy Azriel.